due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. We welcome you back, dear viewers, from the break in our program, In the Names of Allah. In this segment, we have been looking at the 9th name of Allah, Al-Mu'min. Al-Mu'min, the one who grants security and peace. And we're talking about the effect that this name should have on us as believers when we reflect on Allah through this name. And we said that we should take from it a sense of security, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we have done what He has asked us to do, that He will give us the security and protection that we need. We said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the responsibility, as He gave the prophets before us, the responsibility to practice Islam and to convey it to others. Once we have accepted that legacy, then we find trials. That is the nature of the way. We look into the lives of the prophets and that's what we see, trials. In fact, when one of the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, who in this world receives the most trials, O Messenger of Allah? He said, the prophets. Then those like them, then those like them. So, the key is, what keeps them going in the face of all of these trials? It is Allah's name, Al-Mu'min. The fact that He provides us with security to get us through. If we look in the life of the prophets in the past, or we look in the life of the prophets in the future, the Prophet Jesus who is to come back, we see Allah granting that security. In the past, we see in the case of Moses, Prophet Moses, that his mother was given security regarding him from what she feared. Pharaoh was slaying the newborn children, and her child was to be slain also. But she was instructed to put the child in a basket and put it in the river, in the Nile. And that seemed like throwing him away. But Allah brought him back to her for her to breastfeed. And security was granted to her. Also, we find that in the case of Prophet Abraham, conveying the message, breaking the idols of his people. The people at first realizing when he answered, when they asked who did this, and he said, the biggest one, can't you see, he's got the axe around his neck. People, they realized this, no, couldn't be him, because they can't do that. So he said, well, how can you believe in them if they're not able to do these things? So at first, they heard what he said, the message got through to them, but they didn't want it. They preferred to stick with their customs. They said, listen, we have to protect our idols. Prophet Abraham, of course they didn't call him a prophet, he had to be punished. So they made a huge bonfire, threw him in. Allah provided security for him. Allah provided security for him. The fire didn't burn him. Now, this is not to say that if you and I are tested today and they throw us in a fire and our faith is good and strong, we're not going to get burnt. Because we know in the story of the people of the ditch, Ashabul Ukhdud, they were thrown in the fire, but they were burnt. And at the same time, Allah would reward them. The security for them is not that they were saved from the fire. And when the mother, one of the women who were to go into the fire, she hesitated because she had a child. And the child spoke to her. A miracle. The child spoke to her and told her not to hesitate. She jumped in the fire. And we also know in the time of Dajjal to come, when Dajjal will be making a fitna, creating a major trial for people, calling people to believe in him as God. And he will cut a man in half, walk between the halves, then call the man and he comes back together. And the man, Dajjal will ask him, now do you believe that I am God? And he says no. He won't believe it. So he will take him, try to cut off his head, not able to. He will take him then and throw him into the fire that is there with him. Because Dajjal will have, following him, a river which looks like a river from paradise, cool, white, and a river which looks like a river from hell, a river of fire. So he'll take him and throw him in there. And people will see him burnt up. But the Prophet ﷺ said, that man will be going into paradise. That what appears to be his fire is actually the door to paradise. What appears to his paradise is actually a door to hell. So, let's not assume that what happened to Abraham is going to happen to us. But the point is the belief. Allah will provide security. He did it in the past for the prophets. And, as we mentioned, He will do it in the future. He is not bound by time, but He does it in His own way. Don't expect what happened for Prophet Abraham necessarily to happen to us if we're put in the same situation. In the future, we are told by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that Prophet Isa, Prophet Jesus, after he defeats the Dajjal, he kills the Dajjal, then Allah lets loose the Gog and the Magog, two tribes that will come and devastate the earth. Nothing will be able to stop them. Even Prophet Jesus and his people cannot. So he has to take refuge in a fortress in Mount Tur. And there Prophet Jesus makes dua. He prays. Ask Allah's protection, because there's nothing they can do against the Gog and the Magog. And that night Allah sends worms that will bore their way into the back of the heads of the Gog and the Magog, and they will die out. Finish. End. And Jesus and his followers will come out. That is the safety which Allah gave for Jesus. On the other hand, with regards to effects of the belief in the divine names, the believer should reflect on Allah's promise of security for their sincere belief in their own lives with regards to other believers and non-believers. Allah said, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. Those who believed and did not pollute their faith with idolatry will have security and right guidance. That is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ also instructed us with regards to the consequences of how we deal with those around us. As we seek security from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should also provide that security to those around us. So, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, one whose neighbor is not safe from his harm will not enter paradise. So as we receive security, we're required to provide it to those around us. Security to our neighbors, that is the closest person to us. Whether they're Muslim or they're non-Muslim, they should be secure from our harm. There should be no harm coming to us as a result of being their neighbor. Prophet ﷺ had said, by Allah, he does not believe. 3 times he repeated it. And when he was asked, who is that? He said, the one from whose harm his neighbor is not safe. So Islam stressed the importance of the neighbor, looking after our neighbors. So much so, in some narrations, that the Prophet ﷺ said he thought that Allah was going to make the neighbor one of our inheritors. We have to look after our neighbors, provide security for them, and they provide security for us. This is essential for society to be secure. Where people don't care about their neighbors, are not conscious of their neighbors, and don't provide security for them, then the society crumbles. People don't want to have anything to do with those around them. There are places in the West where people live in huge buildings, thousands of people in single buildings, and nobody knows their neighbors. Nobody knows who is next to them. People die in their homes, and nobody even knows until the smell comes under the door. Finally, they call the fire department, they come, break down the door, they go in, they find the person dead inside there. Nobody knew what happened to him. Also, there was an article which I found in the paper many years ago, back in the early 80s. It stated, this is from the Associated Press in London, it said a young woman screamed for help for 25 minutes as she was raped, battered and strangled in London late Friday night. But neighbors said they did nothing because fighting and screams are frequent here. She was beaten to death in the street. Raped, beaten to death in the street. So much so that when the police went to look at the case, they weren't even sure, whether she was 15 or 30. They said she was somewhere between 15 and 30. She was beaten beyond recognition. Broad daylight. Screaming, top of her lungs. People don't want to get involved. That's what happens when neighborliness, concern and security with the neighbor is gone. So, Muslims have to keep this point in mind. Our neighbors, our neighborhoods, very important. As we reflect on this name of Allah, Al-Mu'min, we should recognize not only that we seek peace and security from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will get it as long as we're doing the right thing, but that also we should convey that peace and security to the society around us. That our neighbors should be safe from any harm coming from us, as we should be safe from any harm coming from them. With that, dear viewers, I'd like to thank you for being with us in another in our series, In the Names of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
When you are weak and the road seems long, remember, just remember, seek strength from